Good evening. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchmen on the Pod. We're going to pick back up in Codeword Barbelon 666, Danger in the Vatican, Book 1, The Sons of Laloya and Their Plans for World Domination by P.D. Stuart. We're in Chapter 15, A New World Order, willing or not, ready or not. Cats sneak up on their prey. Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, Babel, whose top may reach unto heaven. Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. In 1990, the Jesuit professor and Vatican insider Malachi Martin wrote a book, The Keys of This Blood. In the book, he states that in 1976, Pope John Paul II stood before an audience in New York City and made one of the most prophetic speeches ever given. The Pope said, "We are now standing in the face of the greatest historical confrontation humanity has gone through. Wide circles of American society and wide circles of the Christian community do not realize this fully." What did he mean? Malachi Martin explains, heaven's agenda, the grand design of God for the new world order had begun. John Paul was more than a geopolitical giant of his age. He was and remains the serene and confident servant of the grand design. Pages 47 through 50. I have that book, by the way. I have not read it. Malachi adds on page 484, when the penetration is consummated, it will be the end game par excellence. What is the end game and the grand design? And why is the Pope so confident of the outcome? What if I told you that there is a highly select body of secret initiates, the Council of Emperors of the East and West, who are determined to bring about a new world order, or that they have repeatedly initiated a series of international crises in order to achieve their objective using Machiavellian schemes, legal machinations from the very bowels of Western democracies, which have been approved by the people in the name of preserving Western values and national security? Is this just another one of those outrageous conspiracy theories, as Bush calls it? Not at all. On January 1st, 2004, CNN reported Pope John Paul II rang in the new year on Thursday with a renewed call for peace in the Middle East and Africa and the creation of a new world order. One well-known Jesuit has referred to this as the Pope's grand design. I now invite the reader to consider the following imperious declarations from James Warburg, the former President George H.W. Bush Sr. Let me reread that. I think I got it all messed up. I now invite the reader to consider the following imperious declarations from James Warburg and former President George H.W. Bush Sr. On February 17, 1950, speaking on behalf of the powerful Rothschild dynasty, Warburg announced, "We shall have world government, whether or not we like it. The only question is whether world government will be achieved by conquest or consent." Almost half a decade later, in 1991, George Herbert Walker Bush Sr., in his State of the Union address, once again referred to this grand design. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in a common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind, peace and security, freedom and the rule of law. I remember watching that. Well, not back then, but the repeats that's been going on YouTube. Lincoln Bloomfield writes in a book, "A world effectively controlled by the United Nations, world government will come about through the establishment of supranational institutions characterized by mandatory universal membership and some ability to employ physical force. Effective control would thus entail a preponderance of political power in the hands of a supranational organization. The Vatican is that supranational organization. Jesuit Malachi Martin wrote, "If tomorrow or next week, by a sudden miracle, a one world government were established, the Catholic Church would not have to undergo any essential structural change in order to retain its dominant position and to further its global aims." What is the New World Order? And why do these men speak of it as though it were a fait accompli? And if those of us affected, all of us are in no position to reverse it. The term New World Order, NWO, was first brought into the public consciousness in 1990 by President George Bush Sr., in a speech he gave before a joint session of Congress. Put simply, the New World Order is organized internationalism, an interlocking financial, political, and economic world force for the purpose of establishing a world government, involving the conversion of the United Nations and its agencies, complete with a world army, a world parliament, a world court, global taxation. Bill Clinton's Jesuit professor Quigley explains, the powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. The system was to be controlled by central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements. Former Senator Barry Goldwater wrote at length of what the rule of law, as Bush called it, means. In his autobiography, With No Apologies, he said, the CFR is the American branch of a society which organized in England and believes national boundaries should be obliterated and one world rule established. This would inevitably be accomplished by a loss of personal freedom of choice and the reestablishment of the restraints which provoked the American Revolution. It represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical, or religious. If the reader thinks that this is all somewhat in the realm of conspiracy theories, just too incredible to believe, consider the words of respected United States Congressman Larry P. McDonald. The Rockefeller file is not fiction. It is a compact, powerful, and frightening presentation of what may be the most important story of our lifetime. The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies to create a one-world government combining super-capitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Not one has dared reveal the most vital part of the Rockefeller story: that the Rockefellers, patrons of the Council of Foreign Relations, and their allies have, for at least 50 years, been carefully following a plan to use their economic power to gain political control of first America and then the rest of the world. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent. On 31st August 1983, Congressman McDonald was killed aboard Korean Airlines 747. I say more on this in Volume 2. On May 4th, 1993, Charlie Rose of PBS interviewed the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, President Les Gilb. The CFR chief told Mr. Rose, "You had me on before to talk about the New World Order. It's one world now, willing or not, ready or not. We are all involved." Now notice the exact expression is used by the Jesuit Malachi Martin in his best-selling tome, The Keys of This Blood, which opens with these uncompromising words: willing or not, ready or not, we are all involved in an all-out, no-holds-bar, three-way global competition. Most of us are not competitors. We are the stakes, for the competition is about who will establish the first one-world system of government that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. It is about who will hold and wield the dual power of authority and control over each of us as individuals and over all of us together as a community, over the entire 6 billion people expected to inhabit the earth in the third millennium. The competition is all out because now that it has been started, there is no way it can be called off. Our way of life as individuals and as citizens, even the badges of our national identity, will have been powerfully and radically altered forever. No one can be exempted from its efforts. No sector of our lives will remain untouched. See Revelation chapter 13, 16, and 17. It is not too much to say, in fact, that the chosen purpose of John Paul's pontificate, the engine that drives his papal grand policy, that determines his day-to-day, year-by-year strategies, is to be the vicar in that competition, now well underway. No holds barred. In other words, by any means necessary. The ends justify the means. On page 341, Martin writes that the one world government will be dominated by an international bureaucracy which controls and directs every citizen in every nation for the good of all. He says it's a winner-take-all race against time. If the winner takes all, what is left for the rest of us? Servitude or a dictatorship? Take your pick. On the earlier page 16, page 13 in some editions, Malachi states, those of us under 40 will surely live under its legislative, executive, and judiciary authority and control, a system that will be introduced and installed in our midst by the end of this final decade of the second millennium. In case you are tempted to dismiss the above revelations of Professor Martin as mere conjectures, permit me to cite his credentials. The back cover of another of his best-selling books, Decline and Fall of the Roman Church, reads, Malachi Martin served 3 popes as diplomat and spy, speaks 17 languages, a renowned professor of Rome's Pontifical Biblical Institute. He helped translate the Dead Sea Scrolls. Indeed, Martin is not your average Jesuit scholar. He was a confidant of 3 popes, a personal friend of John Paul II, and was intimately acquainted with the workings of the Vatican. He had many high-level connections in Rome and around the world, allowing him access to intelligence, information on various organizations and governments. Martin also spearheaded sensitive missions for the renowned Jesuit Cardinal Augustin B, as well as for Popes John XXIII and Paul VI. The blurb on the earliest version of Martin's book states, only Malachi Martin, consummate Vatican insider and intelligence expert, could reveal the untold story behind the Vatican's role in today's winner-take-it-all race against time to establish, maintain, and control the first one-world government. Are you not wonderstruck as to how a man could be a Catholic priest and an intelligence expert, a spy, at the same time? It is said that Martin was released from his vows of Jesuit obedience on his own request while remaining a priest. However, we must remember that Malachi Martin was not just an Irish Catholic, but first and foremost a Jesuit. Thus, being called an ex-Jesuit is like being an ex-KGB agent while still on the payroll of the Politburo, and we all know what that implies. Martin was also an Oxford scholar, the same university that Freemason Bill Clinton attended as a Rhodes Scholar, under the provisions of a will left by another Freemason, Cecil Rhodes. Proof of Clinton's Masonic membership will come later. Now that we have established Martin's credibility, let us see what else he has to say. In another of his books, Professor Martin states as fact that a secret bargain had been made between the Holy See, the Vatican, and a mysterious governing body, which he termed the Lodge, and further that every pope since Pius IX had signed up to this bargain. Being a former Jesuit, we may be rightly considered, Being a former Jesuit, and he has that in parentheses, we may be rightly concerned of being fed with half-truths or misinformation. We must therefore seek to corroborate his statements from other sources. If we find support elsewhere, then we must take his statement with the utmost seriousness. Professor Martin, in his book, leaves us in no doubt who the Vatican regarded at that time as the three competitors for the world supremacy: Western capitalism, led by the United States; communism under Gorbachev; and what Martin calls the Black International. The term Black International is a pseudonym for the hierarchical forces of the traditional Roman Catholic Church, the Holy Roman Empire, the Vatican itself. Martin then proceeds to tell, with reasons in support, which of these three geopolitical giants will emerge as the victor in what he calls the winner-take-it-all global competition, the end game. He says it will be the Black International, a term that has long been used to refer to the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. It is said that in order, so the story goes, to bring an end to communism, the U.S. conducted a joint intelligence operation with the Vatican for the purpose of overthrowing one of the three geopolitical players, Russia. This operation was addressed at length by Carl Bernstein of Time magazine. But Malachi Martin tells us that the Vatican wants it all, for it is a winner-take-it-all game. He says the other two major contenders, the Soviet Union and America, in the Millennium Endgame will be eliminated. How will this happen? As everyone knows, by January 1st, 1992, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics had completely collapsed. The Communist Empire ended. That left just two players, the USA and the Vatican. And Malachi Martin tells us the Vatican is not interested in a power-sharing partnership with America. Who will triumph? Who will be the winner that takes it all? What if one of these remaining players capitulates or cedes power to the other? Is that too preposterous a proposition? For most people, it is difficult to believe that somehow, someday, the Vatican could be in a superior power alliance with the United States of America. But perhaps we have proof of this possibility from the words of President Reagan, who, in April 1982, made this incredible statement to the National Catholic Education Association, Chicago, Illinois. Thank you, Bishop Cummings, Madam Mayor, and distinguished guests. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to be among leaders and educators in the Catholic community. I'm grateful for your help in shaping American policy to reflect God's will. And I will look forward to further guidance from His Holiness Pope John Paul II during an audience I will have with him in June. Reader, it is not clear to you that the Pope is the head of the grand design or big idea? Why else would Reagan need to wait further guidance of the Pope? Peregrine Worsthorn, editor of the London Sunday Telegraph, in his article, Now a Holy European Empire, astutely summarized developments as things stood in 1991. It is in the movement towards federalism of the common market that the Pope may see the greatest possibility for an increase in Catholic political power since the fall of Napoleon, or since the Counter-Reformation. The common market itself started under the influence of Catholic politicians. If European federalism triumphs, the EC will indeed be an empire. It will lack an emperor, but it will have the Pope. The following year, the Singapore Straits Times, January 6, 1992, ran an article extracted from the London Financial Times entitled Pope Hopes to Capitalize on the Fall of Communism. It reported, by the millennial standards of the Holy See, John Paul II is in a hurry to stamp the imprint of the Church on the fast-changing events in Europe. These two short newspaper clippings reveal, ever so subtly, the mastermind behind the fall of communism is also behind the New World Order and the various agents of globalism. They also cast a well-defined shadow of what is to come. It is also significant to note that in his best-selling book, The Keys of This Blood, the Jesuit Malachi Martin says that the Vatican, the Pope, initiated the Millennium Endgame. Why did the Pope initiate such a game? More importantly, what is the Millennium in game? And how did the Pope initiate or start this game? The Millennium in game, Martin tells us, is the destruction of both communism and capitalism, followed by a world government that will have control over each of us as individuals and over all of us together as a community. Malachi Martin, page 16. A year after Martin's book was published, David Funderburk, former U.S. ambassador to Romania, said, George Bush has been surrounding himself with people who believe in one world government. They believe that the Soviet system and the American system are converging. That same year, Brent Scowcroft wrote in the Washington Post, we believe we are creating the beginning of a new world order coming out of the collapse of the U.S.-Soviet antagonism. And A.M. Rosenthal of the New York Times observed, but it became clear as time went on that in Mr. Bush's mind, the New World Order was founded on a convergence of goals and interests between the U.S. and the Soviet Union so strong and permanent that they would work as a team through the UN Security Council. How could the U.S. have worked with the Soviet Union and at the same time collude with the Vatican to bring down communism? What is important about this U.S.-Soviet convergence and collaborations is that they effectively neutralize each other, while the Vatican, under John Paul II, got stronger and gained greater influence. The Soviet Union was the first fall. What is most telling even, is that one of President Gorbachev's very first acts after dismantling the mighty Soviet Union was to travel to Rome and kiss the Pope's ring. We must not miss the significance of this powerful message from the president of the former Soviet Union. For when John Paul II, Johannes Paulus Giovanni Paulio II, the 264th Pope, was first installed in Rome as the so-called Vicarius Filii Dei in the autumn of 1978, he refused to let his aging mentor, Cardinal Wazinski, kiss his ring, but Gorbachev not only kissed the Pope's ring, he called him the highest moral authority on earth. This extraordinary statement by Mikhail Gorbachev was made on December 1st, 1989, when the Soviet president visited John Paul II in the Vatican. Taking his wife, Raisa, by the hand, Gorbachev introduced her to John Paul II, Raisa Maximovna. I have the honor to introduce the highest moral authority on earth. Having surrendered his country to the forces that Paul John II set in motion, Gorbachev was now acknowledging the supremacy and moral authority of the papacy. Reader, communism was created under the auspices of the Vatican, for as the Jesuit scholar Oswald von Nell Breuning told his fellow Jesuits, we are all standing on the shoulders of Karl Marx, but some of us are simply not aware of it. And Pope John Paul II let slip again when he said the Soviet president was an obvious instrument of divine providence and a specific sign of the times. The phrase divine providence was used in reference to a new world order by an earlier pope, John the 23rd. In his address at the opening of Vatican II, he said, divine providence is leading us to a new world of things. In the triumph of Catholicism over communism, we saw the first phase of the Vatican's New World Order, Millennium in game, as initiated by John Paul II. America is next. On July 20th, 1992, Time magazine published an essay entitled The Birth of the Global Nation by Strobe Talbot, a Rhodes Scholar. Talbot was the roommate of President Bill Clinton while at Oxford University and later held a directorship on the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR. He wrote, nationhood as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. Citizen of the world will have assumed real meaning. Chilling words. Who will control this single global authority? Sadly, however, there are still those who will not believe that world government is upon us. Decent folk find it difficult to believe, incomprehensible even. There that there are individuals and organizations so sinister as to actually try to take over the world for their own agenda. There is a striking allegory of this condition in Fenimore Cooper's book, The Headsman, which is a story of an executioner, Balthazar, who travels incognito among the people. His success in evading recognition and capture lies in the fact that the people, recognition and capture lies in the fact that the people of that city are convinced that he is in full hiding from authorities. The executioner therefore openly mingles among the people because he believes no one will recognize him without his hood. Some of the people seem to recognize something familiar in him, and a few even suspect that the character, Count So-and-so, who gets onto a boat with his daughter is the executioner, but they are dissuaded from this thought by the conduct of the executioner. His behavior is so sweet and gentle that he simply cannot be who they think he is. In the same way, the evidence tending to show a global conspiracy are often dismissed on the grounds that no one group or conspiracy could possibly control everything. But the conspiracy is not by just one organization, but shared between the Jesuits and their Masonic agencies, Phi Beta Kappa, Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg, the Council of Foreign Relations, the Round Table, Pauladine Freemasonry, D. Mole, described by Dr. Billy Graham as the premier youth organization of the world, Opus Diaz, and the Deadly Knights of Columbus. As to this latter organization, President George Bush gave an address in 2004 to the Knights of Columbus International Convention in Dallas, Texas. With 5 Roman Catholic cardinals looking on, Bush was introduced by Supreme Knight Commander Carl Anderson and received a rousing response from members of the world's largest Roman Catholic fraternal organization. Bush reminded the Knights that their order was founded in New Haven, Connecticut, the city where he was born. The Knights, said Bush, are soldiers in the armies of compassion. He then assured the Knights of his support for their cause. You have a friend in this administration. You have somebody who wants to work with you to change America. This is an interesting statement by President Bush because Jeremiah J. Crowley says that the Knights of Columbus' principal business is politics. Isn't that something? He just mentioned Jeremiah Crowley. Well, how super cool is that? That's the other book that we're reading. I got sidetracked. Sorry. Let me reread it. This is an interesting statement by President Bush because Jeremiah J. Crowley says that the Knights of Columbus' principal business is politics, Jesuitical politics. Cardinal Gibbings seconds this testimony. He says that the Knights of Columbus are the joy and crown of the Roman Church, and adds, wherever calumny, criticism of the Catholic Church, raises its foul head, they are ever ready, like true knights, to smite the enemy. It is interesting then to note that in January 2004, Justice Antonin Scalia of the U.S. Supreme Court attended a Religious Freedom Day ceremony sponsored by the Jesuit-controlled Knights of Columbus in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Why would a rational-minded judge of the Supreme Court associate with this ultra-fascist Catholic cult? Do you really need an answer? The beloved Pope John Paul II affectionately referred to the Knights of Columbus as the right lay arm of the Catholic Church in America. That it is a Trojan horse in Washington. Why, you may rightly ask, have the American press not spoken about this? Why have they all turned a blind eye and played deaf and dumb to the statement by Mr. Bush and all of these things? Gary Carr explains, after finding out about the establishment's control of mass communication, I was even more appalled, but now at least I understand why I hadn't learned about the conspiracy earlier. The Rockefellers control every facet of the information industry, from television to public education. Therefore, unless a person comes across one of the citizens' groups trying to expose the conspiracy or stumbles onto some aspect of it, as I did, there's no way to find out about it. This is no real surprise, for not only have the Pope's men muzzled the press, but as President Woodrow Wilson once wrote, there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, and so pervasive that those who know of it dare not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. But we have no such fear. We shall reveal all their dark secrets. And since the nights are so litigious, I most earnestly invite them, and the Jesuits for that matter, or any other society of Catholic laymen or clerics, or their combined powers in the American Federation of Catholic Societies, to intersuit against me in any court of competent jurisdiction, so that I will be obliged to prove the accuracy of my assertions or assertions, or admit to my errors. Does that sound like a square deal to you, Sir Knight? I assure you that were such a lawsuit ever to be brought, there will be no help for the widow's sons. As we end this chapter, I leave you with the frightful words of the Jesuit professor Carroll Quigley. In the New World Order, the individual's freedom and choice will be controlled within very narrow alternatives. And who will control these alternatives? Pope John Paul's autobiography, Malachi Martin, answers that question. Oh, no, I said that so wrong. And who will control these alternatives? Pope John Paul's autobiographer, Malachi Martin, answers that question with a most audacious statement. The competition is about who will establish the first one-world system of governments that has ever existed in the Society of Nations. It is about who will hold and wield the dual power of authority and control over each of us as individuals and over all of us together as a community. In fact, that the chosen purpose of John Paul's pontificate, and the Pope too, the engine that drives his papal grand policy, that determines his day-to-day, year-by-year strategy, is to be the vicar in that competition now well underway. The taking over of control of the capitalist West America will be the last and final step in setting up this tightly controlled New World Order. And the Pope, whoever he is at that time, will be its new Caesar. And like the famed dictator of the Roman Republic, Gaius Julius Caesar, he will rule from the Urals to the Atlantic. All power will be in one man. You doubt this? Doubt it not. Ponder carefully the proposition of the former president of the General Assembly of the United Nations, Charles Malik, and a former foreign minister of Lebanon. The only hope for this Western world is an alliance between the Roman Catholic Church, which is the most commonly influential, controlling, unifying element in Europe, and the Western Orthodox Church. The only hope for the Western world lies then in a united Europe under the control of the Pope. That is absolutely insane. All right, brothers and sisters, that ends that reading for tonight. Keep your eyes on Jesus. I am having the worst time breathing tonight, and I don't know why. I know this sounds silly, but I'm just out of breath as if I ran a mile and I haven't. Oh, my goodness. All right, keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters, and your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your heart, my heart, so we will not sin against God or be deceived. You have a good night.